Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Camper will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Camper, you are recognized.
As I look back over my life, even though I've done wrong, he never left me alone, but he forgave me and he kept on blessing. This I recall in my mind, therefore I have hope. It's because of his mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not, they are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. He's been so grateful. Mr. Speaker, member, I come with a very heavy heart this morning. Today is not only just a special day, it's a historic day. Today marks the day of two women who has made history in our state and who has had a huge impact on my life. Two women who made it possible for me to be standing here in this well today. So, as I look back over my life, I'm reminded of all the strong, dedicated, committed, hardworking, and God-fearing women who persevered through some very difficult times in our country and indeed in these two chambers. Right now, today, on the second floor of our Capitol, a Black woman is lying in state. That's history. Senator Harper is the first African-American woman elected to the Tennessee Senate. And at the same time today, the former Speaker Pro Tem, the Honorable Lois DeBerry, today is her birthday. So it's a special day for me. Both of them poured into me. Both of them, based on their walk in life, their life course, made it possible for me to be the minority leader today. Their lives will live on here on this earth. So we have to be mindful of the work that we've done here and the work that we're going to do here, because it will be recorded in the annals of our history. So it's a special day. I like to share a scripture with you. John 15, 12, and 13. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that I lay down one's life for his friends. Bow with me in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for being the great I am. Thank you, Lord, for forgiving us of our sins. Thank you, Lord, for your grace, your mercy. Thank you for thy faithfulness. Lord, be with us as we deliberate here today and doing our state's business. Touch us with your love. We need you, Lord. We can't get along without you. And as we all look back over our lives, we know that you've always been there, that you forgave us and kept on blessing. And it was you that brought us thus far along our way. And it will be you that will see us through. And we are all grateful. We are grateful that your son, Jesus, died for our sins. Father, we come to you as we are ending the close of our session and ask that you be with us, that you keep us, and that when we return home to our families, that all is well. And we will be careful to give you the honor, the glory, and the praise. And it is this that I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Leader Camper will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Garrett here, Farmer here, Campbell here, Parkinson here, Littleton here. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 93 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Byrd, Carter, Cooper, Halsey are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Representative Sapicki, you are recognized.
Thank you. I request that the Sergeant at Arms escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well, please. Representative Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 449 by Representative Sapicki, a resolution to recognize Mount Pleasant High School on the occasion of its 50th anniversary. Whereas the members of this General Assembly are proud to recognize those institutions of learning that are dedicated to providing quality education to every student in their community. And whereas Mount Pleasant High School is one such exemplary institution that has rendered sterling service to the children of the Mount Pleasant community for half a century. And whereas built in 1969, the school officially opened its doors in 1970 with the members of the first graduating class receiving their diplomas in 1971. And whereas Mount Pleasant High School has a focus on STEAM education and has become Tennessee's premier STEAM campus, priding itself on embedding art into the STEM curriculum. And whereas one recent addition that positions Mount Pleasant High School students to be creators, not merely consumers of content, is a recording studio, which gives students access to high quality recording equipment and opportunities to write, record, produce, and mix music. And whereas this addition completes the bridge from Mount Pleasant Middle School recording studio while also crystallizing the relationship and connection with historic Muscle Shoals, Alabama, home of the legendary Fame Studio and the Muscle Shoals Sound. And whereas it is most fitting that we specially recognize and celebrate this milestone achievement in the history of one of the top high schools in the state of Tennessee, now therefore be resolved by the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, the Senate concurring that we commemorate the 50th anniversary of Mount Pleasant High School, honor its administration, faculty, staff, and students, both past and present, for their commitment to quality education, and extend our best wishes for every future success.
Representative Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we are celebrating half a century of education in Tennessee. Today with us we have Mr. Eric Hughes, Mr. Mike Mitchell, Mr. Sam Stowe. We have Principal Jackson, Ryan Jackson, and Director of our schools in Murray County, Director Michael Hickman. We welcome them all today to celebrate this milestone of education in Tennessee. The commitment that this school has made in Murray County has focused and filtered all throughout southern middle Tennessee, the great state of Tennessee, and the United States as a whole. but the commitment they've made recently with the dual pathway of education of our students is leading the state of Tennessee right now, where a student can go to Mount Pleasant High School and choose the college career path or the career technical education path, together making them an extremely strong school that's going to provide for the state of Tennessee a well-rounded student that, one, can read, write, and do math, and number two, can think for themselves and make good decisions in life that affects all of us in Tennessee. So we're here to honor them. At this time, I'd like Principal Jackson to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, State Representative Sapecki. We are honored to be here today. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm a public school product. I'm also a fierce advocate for public schools. We are here to help change that narrative. We are here to help close the gap between industry and education. We are here to get our kids thinking as creators, not merely consumers of content. We are here to help with the skilled labor shortage crisis that's going on in the United States of America. We are here to stop shaming our students for taking non-traditional, non-four-year university paths and instead putting them in the driver's seat, owning their own education at an earlier age and getting them the kind of life-changing opportunities that are reserved to all students in the state of Tennessee. We are proud to say we are doing that at Mount Pleasant High School. In Mount Pleasant, we are the state's only pre-K through 12 TSIN, that's Tennessee STEM Innovation Network designated cluster, the only one in the state that has that designation by Tennessee Department of Education and TSIN. I stand up here today with my band director, Sam Stow, our art director, Mike Mitchell, my assistant principal and right-hand man, Mr. Eric Hughes, and director, Mr. Michael Hickman. We are proud public school advocates serving the students of Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, and we thank you today for having us.
Well, after that, Mr. Speaker, I wish I could say I renew my motion. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for the dedication. You hear the passion that is in Mount Pleasant High School and Mount Pleasant's elementary and middle school. And this is the type of innovation that we need to be thinking of across the state of Tennessee to make it the best place to educate your children in the country. Mr. Speaker, would you come down and take a photo with us, please? Step in front, gentlemen. If you'll grab it right there.
Members, we're under welcoming and honoring Representative Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to please help me give a warm welcome to two men who are very important in my life, my father, Joe Curcio, and my brother, Stuart Curcio. Both of them here today to watch us do a little business. So thanks for being here.
Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence this morning from the Tennessee State Capitol for Dr. Robert Charles Lovingood. Bob, as we all knew him, passed away yesterday and leaves behind his lovely wife, Darlene, and wonderful children, Robbie, Jeffrey, and Andy, along with several grandchildren. Bob was not only a friend, he was a true public servant. Bob was the current mayor of Vonore and former director of schools for Monroe County, Tennessee, and former director of schools for Christian County, Kentucky. Mayor Lovingood served on the Monroe County School Board prior to being elected mayor of Vonore. So let's pause this morning as we take a moment of silence and pray for peace and comfort for the Lovingood family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to have the couple that are responsible for giving me life today. My mother and father, Alvin and Tina Doggett, are with us up here in the gallery, so please make them feel welcome.
Representative Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm fortunate enough this summer to have an intern in my office to help us out, Matthew Jackson from Dixon. Let's give him a welcome.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have 2 cards up here on my desk presented to us by a representative from Rutherford. And these cards are for our friends, Judge Carter and for Coach Byrd. If you haven't signed it, would you please swing by and grab this? And if you have signed it, thank you.
Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to take a moment and congratulate my daughter and my favorite son-in-law. A very happy 9th anniversary, and to thank them for giving us our emigres, and happy Cinco de Mayo Day, everyone.
Representative Moody at Deputy Speaker Johnson's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have an important announcement to make to you today. I'm standing back here because of one of our many dear Sergeant at Arms, but Langdon Deal he will be retiring, and at the end of session, which could be today. And so, Langdon has been with us for 9 years, and those of you that know him know what a great and honorable man he is. He has a strong faith, and, in our weekly devotionals, I think you have perfect attendance. But anyway, he lives what he studies. And so I know you want to wish him well on his next adventure, but please take time to honor him today.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to recognize gentleman Tim Izzy Israel. He lives in Hartsdale, Tennessee. He's been walking across the nation. If he'll stand up, he's up here in the gallery. After becoming fed up with Congress, he's been cross country from Key West to Cape Flattery. Washington is where he's heading to raise awareness for the need on term limits on Congress. The term limit, U.S. term limit, heard about it after he had already walked 800 miles. He has walked all the way to the Alabama-Mississippi border. He is detouring to walk through Tennessee from Alabama border, through Nashville to the Kentucky border. After that, he'll go back to the Alabama-Mississippi border and continue along his main course. He's been drawing all kinds of media attention throughout this walk. So y'all give it up for Izzy Israel. Thank you for your work, sir.
And, Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to add to the Democrat leader's comments. I just want to wish Miss Thelma a fond farewell. She's here lying in state. And what a lovely lady she was. When I was a freshman, we served 8 years together on government operations. And, when you're a freshman, you watch certain people and you watch the leaders. And she just treated her constituents with so much love, always fighting for them. And I always I marveled at that, how she was just so strong fighting for her constituents. But another thing is we served on government ops together, and the state employees bring rules all the time. And we legislators don't always understand when they're bringing these rules that they're making them because we probably passed a bill and they had to make these rules. Well, Thelma always understood that these state employees deserve our respect and our patience, and that they work awful hard and they do a really good job for us. And those are the things I remember about Miss Thelma. She was really a lovely woman, and I know she's dancing with Jesus. I really do. But thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing in line with the be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate bills 118 and 136 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending their consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Representative Hicks of Hawkins, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if I can have your attention for just a second. During this session, if you've been down by the Speaker's office, you've seen a young man sitting there, and I'm going to ask him if he'll stand forward just a little bit as we recognize him. Will Jenkins is from Hawkins County, Tennessee. He's from Rogersville, and he's served this session in the Speaker's office. The Jenkins family go back quite a bit here in the state of Tennessee. His father served back in 1969 to 1970 as Speaker of the House here in Tennessee, and he was the first Speaker since Reconstruction. So it was quite a feat back during that time. Will is a graduate, or getting ready to be a graduate, of Tennessee Tech University, and again, he's a graduate of Cherokee High School, and we are really proud of him, and certainly glad that he decided to come down and spend his summer and a little bit of his spring with us. So would you give him a hand, and thank you, Will, for being here.
Anyone else seeking recognition on the consent calendar? All right, we're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Hardaway, aye. Sapicki, aye. Littleton, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, at the time of recess yesterday, the House was on item 50. That's item 50 of yesterday's regular calendar. House Bill 1028 by Chairman Kumar, relative to regulation of certain products by governmental entities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 28.
Chairman Kumar moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 28 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Kumar.
Mr. Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill 28 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kumar moves passage of Senate Bill 28 on third and final consideration. By second, Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 28 authorizes local government to prohibit the use of tobacco products, vapor products, or both in public grounds, public parks, public greenway, or public property that is accessible to youth under age 21 by ordinance or resolution. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Kumar renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 28, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Stewart, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 28, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1297 by Representative Stewart, relative to municipal powers.
Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1297 on third and final consideration.
Representative Stewart moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates a discretionary fund that can, but is not mandatory, but can be used by municipalities to fund the study of human trafficking and homicide by juveniles. And with that, I'd move passage.
Representative Stewart renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1297, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has everybody voted? Does anybody wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, one nay.
House Bill 1297, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 555 by Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to lay House Bill 555 on the clerk's desk.
Without objection, House Bill 555 laid on the clerk's desk. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body to the heel of yesterday's calendar. That's item 38. Item 38, House Bill 713 by Representative Hurt and others, relative to allocation of per pupil funding to residential mental health facilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hurt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 449.
Representative Hurt moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 449, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 449 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hurt moves passage of Senate Bill 449 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment number 1, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 449 addresses BEP funding following students that, because of the student's treatment plan from a qualified physician, are sent to an out-of-state facility. It allows the facility to receive BEP funding for educational services provided during behavioral health treatment. These facilities' educational programs will be qualified by the Department of Education. It clarifies that only when all options in Tennessee are exhausted, then the BEP funds can follow the student. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hurt renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just think for the record, we need to say that Representative Hurt hijacked this bill from the former chairman of Finance Sub from Dresden, and he could pass this bill. We're really proud of him. It's a great bill. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Just to clarify, the term is bill jacking, not hijacking. Bill jacking. Thank you, sir.
It's not been trademarked yet, my understanding. Any objection to calling the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 449 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays, 2 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 449 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House is ready for item 23. Item 23 from yesterday's calendar. House Bill 1130 by Chairman Farmer relative to causes of action.
Chairman Farmer, you are recognized in the well, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry about that. I move passage of House Bill 1130 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to defer to Finance Amendment 1. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I know I've had a lot of conversation with many of y'all, if not the most of everyone in this chamber, both on the Republican and Democrat side. When this bill started out, it was going to create a new Chancery Court where the judges were going to be elected, one of each from the Grand Division, East, Middle, and West. It was going to be appointed by the governor, and they're going to run in the next election in 2022. That was going to be a statewide popular vote election. We put an amendment on in finance, which changed that, which I think makes it much better and much safer, the situation to where we're going to create a new special court of appeals. So this is no longer a trial court positions. These would be 3 appellate court positions designed to run statewide. They'd be appointed by the governor, confirmed by the General Assembly. Then they would be on retention ballot, not popular vote. They'd be on retention. So this court would be set up to hear cases against the state and also those of redistricting as well. So they'd have that original jurisdiction in those cases. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have. I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to make sure that we have, with this late amendment that we've added on, I just want to make sure we have this. So the governor is going to appoint these judges for an 8-year term beginning this October, and they will be up for a retention election, not a general election. Is that right?
Chairman Farmer.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Representative Clemens. They would be appointed, and of course, the governor would suggest, we'd confirm, he would appoint. They would serve until 22, and they'd be on a retention election on 2022.
Representative Clemens.
And this judge panel, the special appellate court, will have appellate jurisdiction over the constitutionality of state statutes, executive orders, administrative rules, and that'll be discretionary appeal. They'll also have appellate jurisdiction over the validity of municipal ordinances in cases brought by the state, but that appeal will be by right and automatically state proceedings. Is that correct?
Chairman Farmer.
That's correct.
Representative Clemens.
And this court will also have original jurisdiction over any case concerning redistricting. And then if the court finds that redistricting has to be thrown out, then this legislative body gets first bite at the apple to redraw those districts that are challenged. Is that correct?
Chairman Farmer.
That is my understanding.
Representative Clemens.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we have before us is a piece of legislation that is sausage making at its worst. Now, every piece of legislation we have up here goes through the sausage making process, but what we started with here was rotten meat to begin with, and now we've amended it to make it even worse. I've heard a lot of concern about court packing over the last year. I've heard a lot of arms flailing, people concerned about new Supreme Court justice of the United States. If the United States Congress were to create a special court to hear appeals of executive orders issued by the President of the United States, we'd be losing our mind. Yet here we are as a state, we're going to create a new court of appeals to be appointed by this governor for a year, then retained, and then for 8 more years to have exclusive jurisdiction over certain claims of constitutionality and original jurisdiction over redistricting. We are doing nothing less than handpicking judges that we want to hear cases because of legislation we pass. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a proud member of the Tennessee Bar. Other members in this body are as well. Our judges are not the problem. If you don't like the verdict of a case when a statute is challenged, judges aren't the problem. They follow the law and precedent. The legislation is the problem. So instead of creating a new court and handpicking the judges to try to get a better outcome, let's be more thoughtful and more careful with the legislation that we draft and pass. Court packing is not the answer, and that's what this is. We are reinventing and remaking the judicial system to try to get better outcomes. Anybody else who did this, if anyone else tried this, this body would lose its mind. But we have zero problem, apparently, doing just that. I also have a question, and this is for the sponsor. Do you have any constitutional concerns about giving an appellate court appellate jurisdiction and original jurisdiction over specific claims simultaneously?
Chairman Farmer.
No, I don't.
Representative Clemens.
How is the original jurisdiction going to work of this appellate court in those cases? Are they going to try those cases as a case of original jurisdiction? How is that going to work logistically?
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Clemens, the Court of Appeals already have original jurisdiction over their cases, right? So I think this is just going to work just as it does now.
Representative Clemens.
And if the court rules in those cases, is it then going to hear the appeal of those cases as well, or is the Tennessee Court of Appeals going to hear the appeal for those cases, or does it go straight to the Supreme Court?
Chairman Farmer.
Straight to the Supreme Court. It could go straight to the Supreme Court. So they'll hear it. Of course, the Supreme Court has the ability to reach down and pluck it out and hear it and make their own ruling and decision, just as we do now.
Representative Clemens.
So, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to the court packing concerns that you should all be concerned about, you should also be concerned for your local governments. Because when the state sues your local government for an ordinance that your local government has passed, it has an automatic appeal by right. And when they do that, it's going to stay the ordinance that your local government, we all talk about local control, your local government's going to be frozen with respect to a bill or an ordinance that it passed. Ladies and gentlemen, I warn you against taking this unprecedented step that has not been done by any other state. We again are putting ourselves in the position of being a guinea pig in an unconstitutional manner simply to get better outcomes. I cannot emphasize enough. Judges and the court system are not our problem. The legislation we are drafting and passing is the problem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Farmer, you have anything to add?
Nothing.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor, for bringing the bill. Members, there may be an effort to try to get into some weeds to confuse some of you. So I just want to remind the body what we're doing here today. Many of you stuck with me on a piece of legislation that we've passed on this House floor now twice. We passed it last year and this year, and it deals with gerrymandering suits. So if someone brings a suit challenging the way the legislature has redrawn the districts, which we don't anticipate will happen, we have an above the board process. But as we talked about when I was in the well, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, the federal Supreme Court has opined that the states need to deal with those issues. And so one thing that this bill does is it sets up that exact same process that you all voted for 2 weeks ago when we talked about it and voted for it last year on this House floor. So I want to commend the sponsor for bringing this, but it also addresses another concern that we've had. So as a reminder, if someone is bringing suit with constitutional concerns that has got statewide application, we don't need a chancellor in one specific part of the state making a decision that impacts the entire state. This brings, I think, a court of equity and a certain sense of equity to the process. I want to thank the sponsor for bringing this. And I just wanted to be very clear with the body about what we were doing here. I know many of you don't serve on the subject matter committee that this came through. So I just wanted to kind of clear the air. And again, thank you, Chairman Farmer, for bringing the bill.
Chairman Farmer.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate that, Chairman Curcio. You know, one of the things I'd said throughout committee was that this would bring a sense of equity throughout the state. Instead of having one portion of the state or one individual make these determinations, this is going to spread it out on the eastern, middle, and western districts where their expectation or values are going to be more aligned to the whole state. So thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And Mr. Sponsor, you know, I'm 99% of the time I'm with you. This one I can't roll with you on this one. And you know, to my previous colleagues, without calling his name's comment, we didn't want, according to his comment, we didn't want one judge making a decision that had statewide application from one particular area, but it had statewide application. Let me break that down in layman's terms. We didn't want a judge from Davidson County making a decision that had statewide application. That's how you interpret that. That's how you translate that, right? Thank you for that. Now, but we have this process in place called an appeal. And if I'm not mistaken, both of those cases, you know, vouchers and voting by mail were appealed. And the process worked. The process worked. One of them got stopped and one of them went through. The process worked. But apparently, you know, the original decision that was made wasn't palatable. Now, I don't know about y'all, but to me, this seems like we are stacking the courts or packing the courts, adding judges to the courts. The same thing that people are screaming bloody murder about right now if our president, our great president, Biden, decides to add members to the Supreme Court. So my assumption is that if y'all are going to support this, then y'all are going to support that too, right? You just nod your heads. I don't see many heads nodding. So if the election process, and Mr. Sponsor, if you will, if you don't mind, and I'll try to explain and you tell me if I'm wrong. The election process, we're going to elect 3 judges, right? No? Has that changed?
Chairman Farmer.
Okay, it has changed. That was the original bill. We put an amendment on it, which I think makes it much better, which these judges are going to be appointed just as we do appoint the current Court of Appeals judges in our state, something we've done for a very, very long time. And then they're going to be, they'd be appointed by the governor. Of course, we need to confirm them as the House and the Senate. Then they would take that seat. They would sit there until then they'd be on retention election in 2022 when the governor runs again statewide.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even worse than the election. Because I can tell you, Shelby County is not going to have a voice in this. You know, politics is math. Governor's going to make the appointment, and you guys are going to approve it. Even worse than an election. I'd rather take my chances with the election, and I thought that was horrible. So let me wrap this up with this. 2 things. One, I think this is a partner bill to an earlier piece of legislation that we ran that said that these judges, they cannot issue an injunction. They cannot issue a stay. So if something is ruled unconstitutional, they cannot even pause it until the appeal process is over with. That's some good strategy. That means that we can pass all the unconstitutional bills that we want to, and whatever damage it does, it's going to do it before it stops, because the appeals process can drag on possibly. Now, last thing is this: to all my libertarians, if you're a libertarian in here, let me raise your hand. Okay, you don't have to raise your hand. I'm about to put on my Demetarian hat. Mr. Sponsor, is this smaller government?
Chairman Farmer.
Is that on the bill, Mr. Speaker?
I don't think so. Representative Parkinson.
Okay, nice answer. This is not smaller government. All of you that ran on and that used the term, I'm for less government, smaller government, government being in your face, in your business. We don't want them in our households, this, that, and other. We are adding, once again, all of my libertarian friends, that believe in less government. We are increasing the size of government. Let me say it again. Let me put it on the record for y'all. We are increasing the size of government. I think everybody got that now. Just like when we added the second state-run school district, we increased the size of government. So if you vote on this, you are voting to increase the size of government. Let that marinate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Chairman Farmer, anything to add? All right. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Farmer, could you help me with something? Not in the redistricting part of this, but in section 16.7, 104, section C. Is it true that the trial court has to grant permission for the appeal to go to the special court?
Chairman Farmer.
All right, section C says the Court of Special Appeals may review a proceeding in which the Attorney General and reporter intervenes on behalf of the state pursuant to 2914-107B and requests that the court certify appeal of a judgment in the proceeding on the issue of constitutionality. Permission to appeal pursuant to this section, subsection C, must be granted by the Court of Special Appeals and the trial court having jurisdiction over the proceeding. Does that answer your question?
Representative Mitchell.
So is it true that the trial court has to grant permission?
Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Specifically, this sentence that pertains to what you're asking, Representative Mitchell, and thank you for the question. Permission to appeal pursuant to this subsection C must be granted by the Court of Special Appeals and the trial court having jurisdiction over the proceeding.
Representative Mitchell.
So the answer is yes, correct?
Chairman Farmer.
And Mr. Speaker, thank you. And according just a plain reading of this, the answer would be yes.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay. And I was just sitting back here thinking, I'm like, so right now the United States Supreme Court is a majority Republicans. Over the last 10 years, the Tennessee Supreme Court is now majority Republicans. The Tennessee Court of Appeals have been appointed are a majority of Republicans. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals is now a majority Republicans. So I'm trying to figure out, maybe the problem isn't with the judges and the court system. I think my colleague may have hit the nail on the head. I think the problem is unconstitutional legislation coming through this body. I said, I think that's probably where it is, but let's just skip ahead. So probably one of the biggest burrs under your saddle here is maybe the voucher legislation. So it was the governor's shining star, his trophy, that, you know, it lost in state court, I don't know how many times, We just hadn't taken it to federal court. It'll lose there as well. So this special court's not going to help that in the least bit. But it's really special that the guy who lost is going to get to appoint these judges. Then we're going to have a retention election. So when we kick those people out for not following the law, he's going to get to replace the people that get kicked off of this court. So he's the judge, jury, and executioner. I mean, what's wrong with that picture? You know, that sounds like justice to me. So, but I mean, thank God these people that have been appointed to the court over the last 10 years, they've been doing one thing and one simple thing, following the law. I wish we would too.
Chairman Farmer, I think you want to clarify your previous answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I appreciate that, Mr. Speaker. This is a complex bit of legislation here. Under 167-104B brings that up just on appeal. The subsection you spoke of, Representative Mitchell, was subsection C, and that only pertains to certified questions coming out of the court. Certified questions only. And I apologize for any confusion.
All right, Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, is this current version in the House the same version that's in the Senate?
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, we have two separate versions. The trial court version is over in the Senate, as I understand it, and we have our appellate court version here.
Representative Lamar.
So why is it that our two bodies cannot agree on this particular issue?
But Leader Lambert.
Mr. Speaker, point of order. I don't believe on our floor it matters what's happening in the opposing chamber. It's a bicameral legislature. If we could stick to the merits of the bill and talk about anything that we need to on that. But to the clerk, is it appropriate to bring up the posture of where a bill in this chamber is in the opposite chamber or even deliberations that are going on in that chamber?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, it's unparliamentary for one body to reference discussions or votes of the other body.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate your comments, parliamentarian, but we do it all the time. We talk about what's happening in the Senate all the time. I mean, we talk about it's in this posture, so let's table it, or it's in this posture, let's send it to summer study, it's in this posture, we do it all the time. So I differ from my colleague.
But that's fine. Mr. Clerk's rule made his decision now, so we are where we are. Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just pointing that out, but I appreciate your clarification. My next question is, would this cost litigants more money having to go through this new court if they've already been through the trial process? So de novo review. Could you speak to that, please?
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Laura, this has to do with mainly is going to be issues against the state. So this is going to be the state litigating against folks bringing actions against the state, or constitutional issues or redistricting issues and such. So I don't foresee that being an issue on, the common person coming in asking for a hearing or a trial in a trial court or appellate venues. So no.
Representative Lamar.
I really apologize because I really couldn't hear everything you were saying because of the noise. So I apologize. So as a clarification, if someone goes through a trial process, will they have to pay to go through this new process again? Could that, whether you're a legislative or an individual, if you have to go through the trial court, would you then have to pay an additional cost to go through this new court that we're creating?
Chairman Farmer.
Yeah, and thank you. My answer was no. I don't foresee if that happens, that's going to be some far and few between case. But this is an issue usually with regards to the state of Tennessee, so I don't see that affecting the common litigant.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. Why did we feel the need to bring this new court system here? Again, my colleague did an eloquent job of saying, we have all the judicial systems in place everywhere, and they're stacked with members of the Republican Party already. Why do we need a new judicial system?
Chairman Farmer.
Well, as I said earlier, I responded to Chairman Curcio and said I felt like the main purpose behind this was to give folks from the Eastern, Middle, and Western District of Tennessee a voice. I think this is one way to do that.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. So I'm speaking out because members of the legal community and judges in West Tennessee feel like the judicial system is fine and that their voices are heard. So were judges and members of the legal community included in these conversations, more specifically, members from Shelby County and Knox County and the big cities across the state of Tennessee included in the discussion in the process of coming up with this particular piece of legislation?
Chairman Farmer.
I've been very open and transparent to anyone who's came to me to talk about this, and I can't speak to whomever has been involved in whatever other way that I've not been involved in. So, but I've been open my doors and phones and everything else to answer any questions I can for anyone who's called.
Representative Lamar.
So my question is, have you, as someone who's pushing this bill, spoken with lawyers and judges from Shelby County and Knox County about pushing this bill through? Have you spoken with them?
Chairman Farmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't recall speaking to anyone from Shelby County. I'm sure I've spoken with some judges in the Knoxville region in the Eastern. I know I have conversations with the Eastern Tennessee folks and just expressing mostly some concerns with the way we had the bill to begin with the trial court version. But I think the appellate court version has gotten people a lot more comfortable.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. So you just said you were giving West Tennessee a voice, but you just said you haven't spoke with any of the attorneys or judges from one of the biggest city in West Tennessee, Shelby. So I'm confused about how we're giving them a voice when they haven't even been consulted about this particular piece of legislation. My next question is, what state in the United States of America has done this?
Chairman Farmer.
I don't know the answer to that question, but when we make laws and legislation here in Tennessee, I'm really not concerned what other states do or who we're first or last to do it. We do things for policy reasons and because we think it's in the best interest of the state of Tennessee, not because another state's done something.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. So no, my colleagues, no other state in the country, listen now, no other state in the country has created a new judicial system like this. No state in the country. And it is not giving a bigger voice to West Tennessee because they were never consulted about this particular piece of legislation. That's another fact. Could this particular piece of legislation make bills like permitless carry and other constitutional bills we've passed null and void and strike those down too?
Was that a question or a statement? I don't know.
I apologize. Let me rephrase the question. Would this new court be able to strike down many of the legislation that is passed in this chamber, like permitless carry?
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you for that question, but I think we're kind of getting into what if in there, and I hate to speculate on what the court may or may not hear. So I guess the answer to that question is maybe.
Representative Lamar.
I think that's a really important question. And, I haven't spoken on the floor a lot this year about particular issues, but we are talking about creating a new judicial system. And we're saying that, I don't know, they could consult or not consult on any of these particular issues. I'm gonna wrap this up and say this, guys, I think this is really, really dangerous. It hurts you more than it helps. We are creating big government. There's no other state in this country that has ever done this. We can't even agree amongst ourselves about how to push this piece of legislation. So I'm just asking you not to vote for it because our judicial system is intact, it's great, and we don't need to mess with it. Let the judges do their job and let's not make that even harder and more costly for the citizens of Tennessee. Thank you.
Chairman Farmer, would you like to explain the one state that has done this real quick? Chairman Farmer.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Pennsylvania actually has a court that's set up very similar to what we're intending to do here. So there is another state, it's Pennsylvania, and it's not the exact legislation or the exact court we got set up. It's very similar. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How many years has this court been in place in Pennsylvania? And as you just stated, it's still not the same, but please elaborate on how long that's been in place.
Chairman Farmer.
I don't know.
Representative Lamar.
And what type of bills, excuse me, not bills, litigation did they cover?
Chairman Farmer.
You know, I don't practice law in Pennsylvania, and I've never heard or seen a case brought before that court, but I would guess, and this is total speculation, they would hear constitutional issues with regards to their state, just as this is, just as a broad answer to your question. But frankly, I don't know.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I just want to point out, it's still not the same thing. So technically it goes back to we're really the first state to do this because it's not even the same as he just said. And we're not even sure what particular cases they cover. So again, I'm saying this is a dangerous piece of legislation. I know many of you don't want to listen or whatever, but just hear me out. We don't need to do this. Our judicial system is fine. Let's keep it how it is and move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Parkinson, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, because you hadn't ruled me out of order enough this year, I want to recognize our former colleague. I call him Pretty Ricky. Rick Staples is in the building. Can you stand up, Rick Staples? Mr. Speaker, I could recognize that glow off the top of his head from anywhere, so that's how I was able to spot him up there. Thank you, Rick Staples. Mr. Speaker, I need you to rule me out of order, please.
Out of order. Representative Griffey, you're recognized. Representative Griffey.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My light wasn't working. Apologies. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this legislation. Let me ask you a question, if I can, for clarification purposes. What we're doing is we're setting up an appellate level court system to hear appeals involving constitutional challenges and the redistricting challenges. Is my understanding correct on that?
Chairman Farmer.
That is correct, Representative Griffey.
Representative Griffey.
And is it also correct that the judges will be initially appointed and then they'll sit for a retention election?
Chairman Farmer.
That's correct, but remember, we're going to confirm those judges before they're appointed to that seat.
Representative Griffey.
And confirmed by us. Thank you very much. Members, I've actually, to address some of the concerns of my friends on the other side of the aisle, I would suggest much of their concerns are simply rhetoric. I did speak with Chancellor Childress, who is the trial judge's representative for the state of Tennessee, and they were fine with this bill. The only concern they had was with having a statewide election for 3 judges to have to run a statewide election across the thing. This amendment has solved that problem. I submit that this bill is appropriate and responsible. What it does, it addresses a problem that we've had in Tennessee for many years when this was set up. And that was all the challenges for state constitutional challenges went through one court, the Davidson County Chancery Court. And that gave the citizens of Davidson County, because those chancellors are elected, that gave them a super sort of veto over what's going to be the policy for the state of Tennessee. Now, judges are human beings like everybody else, and our trial judges are elected. So they're politicians in a manner of speaking as well. They try to keep politics out of it and stick to the law. But we all know from history in America that lawyers and judges are humans like everybody else. They have their political philosophy, their views on the law. Many people simply are great judges, simply interpret the law and it's what it is, and not create issue and not become judicial activists. But not all judges follow that. And I want to thank the sponsor for bringing this legislation and everyone else that's supporting it. I think it's a fair and appropriate response so that we have a 3-judge panel, not just 1 judge, that will hear these challenges, and that you'll get a better outcome by having this additional resources. So thank you very much for bringing it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Farmer, you good? Representative Moody or Gant at Gant's desk. They're pointing at each other.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for letting me take a moment. I have a dear friend, a constituent here in the gallery, Charlotte Kelly. And Charlotte and her husband are hardworking folks in Tipton County. And also my good colleagues here, Ron Gant and Chris Todd, know her well. And so we wanted to do it together and just welcome her. And it's so good to see you. I'll talk to you soon.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, yield.
Chairman Farmer.
I do. Thank you.
Representative Miller.
The governor will make the appointments of the three-judge panel. And the House and Senate would confirm. Will it be by 2/3 or by a simple majority?
Chairman Farmer.
Confirmations on simple majority, or confirmations are simple majority, aren't they? Our typical confirmations. I should know this. Our judges, I think it's a simple majority. It's not, okay.
On the selection.
Right. Yeah, and
Hang on. We're just going to make sure we have the right answer for you. One second. Da, 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 da. Chairman Farmer.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Miller, to answer that question, it's a simple majority of the Senate and House together.
Representative Miller.
Why not 2/3?
Chairman Farmer.
Well, I think historically that's the way we've done confirmations, and we didn't want to stray off that path.
Representative Miller.
So will they be confirmed as a Republican judge or Democratic judge?
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. In this situation, of course, the legislation doesn't speak to that, but I think that if the governor were to appoint someone, I don't think it's on a partisan basis. I think they're just there for us to hear whether they're qualified or not, and we move forward.
Representative Miller.
So upon the governor vetting the potential judges, he could appoint, upon him vetting the judges, he could appoint all three judges as Republicans.
Chairman Farmer.
That's correct.
Representative Miller.
Why would that be fair and balanced?
Chairman Farmer.
Well, historically, the state of Tennessee, the governor has always, they've appointed our Supreme Court and such, and it has ebbs and flows. I mean, there's Republican governors, there's Democrat governors, so I guess why was it fair for that to happen, for the last 150 years versus now? This is the way we've always done it, so we just want to stick to what we do.
Representative Miller.
For the record, these will be political appointments of judges, not independent judges, but political appointment of judges.
Chairman Farmer.
Well, I think that they would be appointments of judges that are qualified to hear unique cases of the nature of which they'll be brought to them if and when. So that's where I'm going to leave that.
Representative Miller.
Upon passage of this law, and I'm assuming once it goes to conference with the Senate, we have no idea what's going to come back. Who could challenge this law in court?
Chairman Farmer.
Can you rephrase the question?
Representative Miller.
Who could challenge this law if it become law? Who could challenge it in court?
Chairman Farmer.
Are you asking who can challenge this piece of legislation if we were to pass this and become law?
Representative Miller.
Yes. Could ACLU immediately, anybody can file a lawsuit, any citizen? That was my question.
Chairman Farmer.
Yeah, and I believe you're correct. I think anybody can bring any lawsuit just about for anything at any time.
Representative Miller.
Would you anticipate a lawsuit upon passage and the signing of this law by the governor?
Chairman Farmer.
I do not, because I believe it's constitutional, and we followed the protocols and things that the way that we've done things for years and years. We currently do this, and we certainly, the legislature certainly has the authority and power to set up new courts. So that's what we're doing.
Representative Miller.
You believe that and anticipate that there will not be a lawsuit, but as you just said, anybody can file a lawsuit at any given time.
Chairman Farmer. He passes. Representative Miller.
Chances are this is going to go to conference committee. Could you give us an idea of what you would not yield on once you are within the Senate?
Sorry, that's off the bill. That's a question. You don't know that because they could confirm to the bill when it goes over. We do not know what they may or may not do and what he may or may not stick to. So, Representative Miller.
Thank you, sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rudd.
Well, I think it's no secret. You and I have had some minor judicial disagreements this year, but I want to say this is an excellent bill. I signed on yesterday. It's headed in the right direction. It's doing something that needs to be done. One thing that's always bothered me, regardless of if a judge is political or makes a bad decision, it's not ethical and it's not right for one county to be totally in control of such decisions for the rest of the state. This would at least be fair and equitable, would be set up across the state, and it would treat everybody more fairly and more transparent. So for that reason, I think it's an excellent bill, and everyone should be supporting it for that reason, if no other. Thank you.
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you, Chairman Rudd. I have the utmost respect for you, and yeah, that's why we do things where we're here. We're members. We work hard, and we're passionate about what we do, and we're trying to make good policy right now. So I appreciate your comments.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing this legislation. And, you know, we are here as members to make improvements. We will have some disagreements along the way, but that's natural. And as a practicing lawyer, the Davidson County court systems actually has done something that's been, that's worked over the past several years. I don't know if the members are aware, but they've created a business court in the Davidson County court system. And what that business court does, because there's so many corporations that are here, so many things that happen here, when they get wrapped up in litigation, that litigation is often very complicated of how these corporations are organized, how the documents, how they relate to each other, how many subsidiaries they have, et cetera. So it's a very complicated lawsuits. The National Business Court has been a pilot program, according to the Supreme Court, and it's been a very successful way to understand the complications of how businesses operate, how they're organized, what matters are litigated before them to winnow down the issues so a judge that's in charge of this particular National Business Court can make those decisions efficiently, effectively, and in a timely manner. And so this is what we are designed to do here as a General Assembly, is to make matters of such complication, of such intricate, when it deals with someone that's challenging our state constitution, to make sure that we have that efficient response. The decision is well-earned, well-educated folks that are going to be part of this new court. And so I would applaud the fact that we are doing the same thing with what this legislation creates. So Chairman Farmer, thank you for carrying this legislation, because we know that we have to improve our systems, and that's what we do here. So I appreciate the effort. I appreciate the legislation. Thank you very much for bringing it.
Chairman Farmer.
Thank you for that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? I see objection. We're on the board voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 69, 23 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1130 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 68, 23 nays.
House Bill 1130 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Go on, next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 745 by Chairman Haston and others relative to the Tennessee Work Ready Opportunity Program. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Haston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1135.
Chairman Haston moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1135, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1135 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Haston moves passage of Senate Bill 1135 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Education Instruction Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Chair, next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the heel of the amendments, please.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 3.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 3 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the amendments. House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1 as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Haston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We often emphasize preparing our students for the next test, the next class, and the next grade. What this bill does is help prepare our high school students for their first career. This bill does that by offering our high school seniors the opportunity to take a nationally recognized career readiness assessment at no cost to the students or to the schools. Over 800 companies in Tennessee recognize and utilize the National Career Readiness Certificate that can be earned through a career readiness assessment. This means that with every year that we offer this exam to our students, we will be creating a direct connection point with thousands of our Tennessee students to hundreds of Tennessee companies. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Haston renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1135 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Bill 1135 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we're on item 28. Item 28, House Bill 1433 by Representative Holtzclaw relative to sentencing. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 1433 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Holtzclaw moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment. Oh, sorry. Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1373 on.
Chairman Holtzclaw moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1373, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1373 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Holtzclaw moves passage of Senate Bill 1373 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 is in the Senate bill. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1433 enhances the penalty from a Class C felony to a Class C felony when a person discharges a firearm within a motor vehicle. I renew my motion, Mr.
Chairman
Speaker.
Holtzclaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1373 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Hardaway, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 1373 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. Motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes Tuesday's regular calendar.
Mr. Clerk, next order.
Mr. Speaker, on the desk, House Message Calendar 2 dated Tuesday, May 4th. That's House Message Calendar 2 from yesterday. First item, House Bill 374 by Representative Castro to Law Enforcement. Mr. Speaker, on May 4th, 2021, the Senate further considered House Bill 374, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 374 as amended.
Representative Rudd, for what purpose, please?
A brief announcement of great importance, Mr. Speaker. There are 25 Crystal cheeseburgers on both Halsey's desk and chips if anyone wants them. Thank you.
Do they have onions?
I have it on good authority. They do, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Well, I will pass. Representative Cassidy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to thank the member, the chairman, for bringing the Crystal's hamburgers. They were quite tasty. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I will wish to concur with amendment number 1. And would it be proper for me to briefly read amendment that I'm asking to adopt? I'm sorry, amendment 2. I'm sorry. So what we're adopting, ladies and gentlemen, is the Senate sent over, and it reads accordingly: if the majority of the members of the Community Oversight Board become non-voting members, then the board shall not take any official action until the majority of the members have completed the academy. And that's what I'm asking that we concur in.
Representative Cassidy moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 2 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 68, 22 nays.
Senate Amendment number 2 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. Motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 568 by Chairman Reagan relative to administrative procedure. Mr. Speaker, on April 22nd, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 568 for Senate Bill 1081, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 568 as amended.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment that the Senate passed essentially stripped out the venue selection process that was in the bill we passed, which I tentatively agreed to on the basis of another bill we had. So I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, sir.
Chairman Reagan moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 2 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 72, 20 nays.
Senate Amendment number 2 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 3 on that calendar was disposed of yesterday. Brings the body to item 4, House Bill 767 by Leader Lamberth, relative to insurance companies, agents, and brokers.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, on May 3rd, Senate substituted House Bill 767, Senate Bill 726, adopted Amendment 2, passed House Bill 767 as amended.
Chairman Hawk moves to concur. Chairman Hawk moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Chairman Hawk.
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just a brief explanation. This is the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance Modernization Act. The Senate has done everything that we've done similarly. They've removed the Secretary of State's office as being in service of process, so that's the only difference between the House and Senate version. I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 2.
Chairman Hawk moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Who's going to be the service process if not the Secretary of State?
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's currently with the Commissioner, Department of Insurance, Commerce and Insurance. It will stay with the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance.
Representative Clemens? We're good. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment 2 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Amendment Number 2, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurring without objection the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 888 by Chairman Curcio and others relative to expunction. Mr. Speaker, on May 3rd, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 888 for Senate Bill 675, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 888 as amended.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Senate amendment removed the A and B felonies from the expansion of the expungement statute that we worked on earlier in session. And in the spirit of trying to get home sometime this month, I move to concur.
Chairman Curcio moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Sponsor, again, thank you for the legislation. It's great legislation. They removed the A and B felony. What does that leave us with?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question, and I appreciate you helping with this legislation as well. What we were trying to do was expand nonviolent, non-sexual related offenses and add those to the expungement statute. My original legislation would have expanded that all the way up to things like a felony theft, for example. If you'd served you typically would serve a 15-year sentence on something like that. In that case, you would have had to wait another 15 years before you could petition the judge to have it expunged. I felt like that was a very conservative bar to have to jump. The Senate just removed any A or B felonies from the structure. So now you can expand all the way up to C's. You'll be able to have expunged. Current law is E's and 1D. So it is a pretty large expansion from the way we do it now. It just doesn't include those A and B felonies. And again, in the spirit of cooperation, I felt like incremental progress was still good progress.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we don't want to lose this bill. I think I'm okay with you concurring. I appreciate your effort too. Thank you so much.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 1 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays, one present, not voted.
Senate Amendment Number 1 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurring without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 902 by Chairman Doggett and others relative to handgun permits. Mr. Speaker, on May 4, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 902 for Senate Bill 1334, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 902 as amended.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Amendment Number 2 removed the reporting portion from our registry bill and also removed the penalty for that. I move to concur with Senate Amendment Number 2.
Chairman Doggett moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 2. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 2 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 21 nays.
Senate Amendment 2, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurring without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 910 by Representative Castlet relative to public records. Mr. Speaker, on May 4, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 910 for Senate Bill 572, adopted Amendments 1 and 2, passed House Bill 910 as amended.
Representative Cassidy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur to Senate Amendments 1 and 2. Briefly, they read as like this. The amendment is the subject does not apply to consumer reporting agency when compiling a consumer report. And number two, upon a written request of a motor vehicle accident report, the information will be released. I move adoption of Amendment 1 and 2.
Representative Castle moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1 and 2, properly seconded. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1 and 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member votes, any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Amendment number 1 and 2 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 8 on that calendar was taken up yesterday. House ready for item 9, House Bill 1534 by Representative Weaver, relative to teachers, principals, and school personnel. Mr. Speaker, on May 4th, the Senate substituted House Bill 1534 for Senate Bill 653, adopted Amendment 1, and passed House Bill 1534 as amended.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment requires the eligible educators to take an assessment pursuant to the state board's rules and policies in order to ensure the content knowledge from the teacher. So based on the intention to come back next year, work with the House sponsor and the Senate sponsor of this legislation to file legislation so that the state will pay for this praxis exam, I will concur to Senate Amendment number 1.
Representative Weaver moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Curcio, aye. Garrett, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, nays.
Senate Amendment number 1, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the House message calendar number 2, dated Tuesday, May 4th. Mr. Speaker, on the desk, House message calendar for today. That's today's House message calendar. Item 1, House Bill 210 by Representative Carringer and others relative to education curriculum. Mr. Speaker, on May 5th, 2021, the Senate refused to recede in its actions in adopting Senate Amendment number 1.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to refuse to recede from our action and non-concurring in Senate Amendment number 1, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies.
Representative Carringer moves to refuse to recede from our action and non-concurring in Senate Amendment number 1, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies. Properly seconded. Without objection, motion carries. I appoint the following members: Representative Carringer, Sapicki, Haston, and Wendell. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Bill 623 by Chairman Reagan relative to the Department of Education. Mr. Speaker, on May 5th, 2021, the Senate refused to recede in its actions in non-concurring in House Amendment number 2 and appointed a conference committee.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to accede to the request of the Senate and ask that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies.
Chairman Reagan moves.
To accede.
All right. Representative Reagan moves to accede to the request of the Senate and asks that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the difference between the two bodies. Properly seconded. Any discussion? Without objection, motion carries. I appoint the following members: Representative Reagan, Sapicki, White, and Akeem. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1171 by Chairman Terry relative to handgun permits. Mr. Speaker, on May 5th, 2021, the Senate refused to recede in its actions in adopting Senate Amendment number 2.
Chairman Terry, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to refuse to recede from our action and non-concurring in Senate Amendment Number 2, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a light committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies.
Chairman Terry moves to refuse to recede from our actions and non-concurring in Senate Amendment Number 2, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a light committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies. Properly seconded. Any discussion? Without objection, motion carries. I appoint the following members: Representatives Terry, Farmer, Doggett, and Wendell. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Bill 1552 by Leader Gant, relative to business and commerce. Mr. Speaker, on May 5th, 2021, the Senate non-concurred in House Amendment Number 1.
Leader Gant, you are recognized.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I move that we refuse to recede from our action in adopting Amendment Number 1.
Without objection, we refuse to recede. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes today's message calendar number 1.
Next calendar, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have a regular calendar number 1 dated for today, Wednesday, May 5th, 2021.
Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 490 by Chairman Terry and others relative to regulation of cannabis for medical use. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 118.
Chairman Terry moves substitute conform Senate Bill 118, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 118 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Terry moves passage of Senate Bill 118 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Letterwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move we roll this to the hill of the amendments.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 2 by Representative Clemens. Mr. Speaker, it was not timely filed. The sponsors allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All my amendment does, it is the exact same language as the sponsor's amendment. It's verbatim. It simply removes 2 references to freezing our state and preventing us from acting until marijuana is removed from Schedule 1 of the Federal Controlled Substances Act. This has been used as an excuse not to pass medical marijuana by this body and the one down the hall for years. There is no sense in codifying that excuse for us not taking action. So this bill amendment simply removes that sentence, keeps us from being paralyzed until the federal government acts, and encourages us to act. 16 states have legalized marijuana. 36 states have legalized medical marijuana. 32 states have decriminalized it. We're one of only 6 who have done nothing. This is a poor excuse for legislation. Let's do better, pass medical marijuana instead of these types of bills. Thank you.
Was your motion to
I moved to consider.
recognized?
I got cut off. I apologize.
Well, you only have a minute. Is your motion for consideration or to withdraw?
For consideration.
Very good. You've heard the motion. We're voting for consideration of amendment number 2. All those in favor of considering amendment number 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, let's take the vote.
Ayes 26, 62 nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having failed to receive the necessary 2/3 vote, the motion to consider amendment number 2 fails. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the amendments. House Health Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Leatherwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what this bill does, basically does 5 things. It sets up a medical cannabis commission in order to help develop a non-biased medical cannabis program for when the federal government removes cannabis from Schedule 1. Secondly, it sets up a process for decriminalizing possession of 0.9% THC cannabis oil for a limited number of patients with certain diseases. Currently, 0.9% is decriminalized for those with epilepsy. It adds 8 conditions to that. It also has the commission prioritize the recommendations for creation of a patient registration system in order to facilitate reciprocity and access for patients, including those 9 groups of patients. It prohibits corporate medical cannabis program until cannabis is scheduled is removed from Schedule 1. That includes cultivation, distribution, processing, or shipping of cannabis. However, it does ensure that there's still patient and research protections should we wish to advance those issues. With that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Terry renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you. So I was very excited when I heard that this had reemerged and was going to be considered, and then learned that we have this exception for the Schedule 1 that's in it that essentially limits the effectiveness of this bill. And so I don't understand why we're giving in, and I know there was a late filed amendment that would have done away with that, but I just feel like, in many ways, this is a hollow bill. It's a hollow vote. We'll be telling people that a false narrative that we're going to have true medical marijuana and cannabis in the state. And unfortunately, with that section, that's not going to be in there. So can you tell me, with that section in there about the Schedule 1 and the federal, while they still have it listed as a Schedule 1, will Tennesseans in this state have access to medical marijuana once we pass this legislation?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. That's a great question. And to the point and to the previous amendment, I don't disagree with the sentiment from that, and I don't disagree with your sentiment there. What this does, if this passes, those 8 additional diseases, if they get their attestation letter, will be able to possess 0.9% cannabis oil in the state of Tennessee. So if you're saying, will they have access, if they have one of those 8 conditions and they are able to get it, they will be decriminalized. They will not be prosecuted for a Class C misdemeanor in the state.
Representative Powell.
Well, and I appreciate, and I know where your heart is on this, and I appreciate you advancing, taking this small step. But, I wish we could go further. I wish we weren't limited to these 9 different ailments. I think there are more people in our state that are suffering and would benefit greatly from having access to medical marijuana. I think we're missing out on incredible potential economically, the economic potential in our state to grow and harvest medical marijuana. This is a tremendous issue for a lot of constituents. I know I hear majority in my district that support this overwhelmingly. And I hope we can soon get to a place where we have true medical marijuana in this state, and we didn't have limited by this federal restriction. And I'm very hopeful too that the feds will soon lift that as well. But again, wish that wasn't in there, but I appreciate your first steps on this. Thank you.
Terry, no. All right. Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess I raised to speak with the same concerns about us being hamstrung in this legislation by the federal government. I have been a supporter of marijuana reform, as many are, a supporter of medical cannabis, as 88% of Tennesseans are. Tennesseans deserve action on marijuana reform, not more lip service, no more do-nothing government commissions, and not more delay tactics. And I feel that's what this is, a delay tactic. I heard this body talk this year about unelected bureaucrats making these decisions. Why are we giving these decisions to someone else? And it seems that this body only cares about federal law and judicial precedent when it asserts their own worldview, when it agrees with their own worldview. Multiple times on this floor, I've heard us stand up and say, we're going to go against what the federal government says. So it seems like we shouldn't be hypocritical. If we're going to stand up against the federal government on some issues, why aren't we standing up on this issue and joining multiple other states? So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Chairman Terry.
Thank you, and I appreciate those concerns. Again, one of the things that this bill does from a patient standpoint, and you say as far as not moving forward, it does have the commission prioritize the recommendations for creation of a patient registration system. And so when we get that in place, again, that would take legislation, but it prioritizes that, then patients can have reciprocity in other states. So it is a step forward for patients. I'm willing to take that step forward for patients. And so, and then you mentioned too, as far as, from the federal law, again, we're decriminalizing it for those patients in here. So we are taking some steps.
Representative Johnson and Knox.
And I do appreciate small steps, but my bigger concern is this portion about waiting on the federal government is going to put us behind in the long run. That's my concern. But I do appreciate those small steps forward. I just think this one giant step could cause some serious problems.
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. And to your point, we're already behind. 36 other states have done that. And so I don't disagree with that sentiment.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Dr. Terry, Mr. Sponsor, I'm with you. I'm with you on this bill, but talk about a buzzkill. No pun intended. This honestly, what we've done really in reality is simply amended Chairman Faison's bill from a few years ago. I remember when we were all excited about, the push that he was making, and it got whittled down to such a very, very, very small and strict and tight space that really it was almost useless. And we're kind of in that same space with just a little bit more, fringe items that come with this bill. I support you though, but hey, let's be honest, members. Everything marijuana is moving through this state right now. Edibles, chocolates, drinks, this, that, and other, you name it, is moving through this state. Whether or not you're gonna be able to put all of your laws in place and catch it, you're gonna be chasing this thing forever. But whether you like it or not, it's moving through the state. Here's the other thing. All of these people, these individuals, these parents, grandparents, veterans that need this access, you're forcing them into criminal behavior because they're going to get it because they need it. They feel like it will be helpful. So you can keep on passing your tight laws. We're gonna put everybody in prison and this, that, and other. But guess what? It's here in our state. Hey, here's another fact. You ain't got but about 3 or 4 testers out here that can actually test marijuana. And guess what? There's a lot of hemp. Wink, wink. There's a lot of hemp growing in the state, but you ain't got but 2 or 3 testers. I wonder if that was by design. Yeah, I wonder if that was by design. You got 2 or 3 testers that can test all of the hemp that's growing in our state. So maybe we're inadvertently protecting something that we don't know exists. This is, I almost said a bad word, but well, thank you. Caught myself. This is equine manure. We honestly need to get real about what we're doing and about protecting our folks. And we also need to get real about being the last doggone state to everything. Because what's going to happen is our people are going to go across these borders. They're going to go into Arkansas. They're going to go into Mississippi with theirs. They're going to go into Illinois. And guess what? All of that Tennessee money is going to go to these other states for the same thing that y'all wouldn't pass. I'm supporting you on this, and I understand your heart and our need to do something. But God, I wish we could do more. This is horrible. And I feel for those Tennesseans that are suffering because we narrow this thing down so tight that you got to jump through 1,000 hoops to get to it. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor, for what you're doing.
Chairman Terry.
Thank you for your comments, and I don't disagree with you. But again, I'm trying to advance what we can for patients, and I've worked on this for several years, and an advancement for patients, I think, is a good step.
Chairman Jernigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll call a question.
Previous question be called. Any objection? I don't see 5 hands. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 118, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 74, 17 nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 118 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Resolution 110 by Representative Hardaway, a resolution to recognize and honor Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. Mr. Speaker, it was previously considered and reset for today's calendar.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment number 008288 that's untimely filed. I'll ask for consideration. Move adoption of House Resolution 110.
Representative Hardaway moves adoption. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, House Amendment 1 by Representative Hardaway and others. Mr. Speaker, it was not timely filed. The sponsors allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I inserted 3 words. Dr. Barber has described. Move to consider, sir.
You've heard the motion. We're voting for consideration of amendment number 1. All those in favor of considering amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Zachary, aye. Hakeem, aye. Love, aye. Freeman, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having received the necessary 2/3 vote, the motion to consider amendment number 1 prevails. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption.
Representative Hardaway renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Hardaway moves adoption amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Resolution 110 recognizes and honors the service of Reverend Dr. William Barber II. I move adoption.
Representative Hardaway renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection? Representative Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, I could not hear what the gentleman was saying. I heard noise, but I didn't understand what he said.
Representative Hardaway, can you describe the resolution briefly, please?
Yes, sir. I move adoption of House Resolution 110, which honors and recognizes Reverend Dr. William Barber II.
Representative Reagan. Representative Reagan, you're good?
Mr. Speaker, I did hear that part, but I understand that the amendment that was put on, I could not hear. I heard the noise again. So
Okay.
for the sake of clarity, would the amendment be repeated again before we vote on the bill, just for my clarity?
Yes, he'll do that. I think it changed 3 words, Representative Hardaway, or added 3 words.
Thank you, Speaker. The 3 words are Dr. Barber has described.
Dr. Barber has described. Thank you. Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Oh, Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Representative Hardaway. So in looks like maybe the 4th whereas clause that talks about the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. Can you educate us on that? Truthfully, I don't know what that means.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you for the question. This is about that particular section cites what Dr. Barber believes to be the objectives of developing and promoting a moral budget and a moral agenda.
Representative Cochran.
Okay, respectfully, though, I'm not sure if that answers the question of what is the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. Tell me what that line specifically means, if you don't mind.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. All 5 of these interlocking injustices, as described and adopted by Dr. Barber, are included here as the reason that he has developed his moral agenda and his moral budget.
Representative Cochran.
All right, I'm going to take one more shot. But tell me what I understand that those are all interrelated in that whereas clause. Tell me what that means if you know, if you don't mind to tell us, the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. And I'm asking that sincerely. I do not know what that means. Can you tell me what that means?
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. There is a Christian nationalism. Dr. Barber observes some of those narratives as not being in line with his way of thinking.
Representative Sapiki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, in section 4, and I just want to make sure it's on this, talks about the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy, and militarism, and ecological devastation. Is that correct? Is that in the language?
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. These are the 5 interlocking injustices as Dr. Barber has described them.
Representative Sapiki.
So the answer would be yes.
Representative Hardaway.
These are the 5 interlocking injustices as Dr. Barber has described them. I'm not sure what your question is beyond that, sir.
Representative Sapiki.
The question I'm asking is, the things that I said are in the whereas clause. Is that a true statement?
Representative Hardaway.
Well, I'll be happy to read the whereas clause. I'm not sure what you read. Whereas in 2018, he helped relaunch the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. This initiative was begun in 1968 by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and started with a historic wave of protests calling for a moral agenda and a moral budget to address what Dr. Barber has described as the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy, and militarism, ecological devastation, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism.
Representative Sapiki.
Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Move previous question.
All right, previous question's been called. Any objections? All those in favor of House Resolution 110, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 28, 35 nays, 20 present, not voting.
Having failed to receive a constitutional majority, it goes to calendar and rules. Mr. Clerk, call up next bill, please.
House Bill 513 by Leader Gant and others relative to criminal law.
Representative Gant, you are recognized. Representative Gant, you are recognized. Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 513 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gant moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee, Amendment number 1.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairlady Hazelwood moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation has 4 sections that apply, and I'm going to go through these 4 sections. Section 1 increases the penalty for incapacitating a highway or other passageway to a Class E felony and a mandatory fine of $3,000. Section 2 creates criminal immunity from prosecution for any drivers who are exercising due caution, who unintentionally cause injury or death to a person illegally obstructing a roadway. Section 3 creates a Class A misdemeanor for a person who throws an object at another with the intent of harming the other person while participating in a riot, and a Class E felony for a person who throws an object at another and causes bodily injury while participating in a riot. Section 4 creates a Class A misdemeanor for a person while participating in a riot who intentionally intimidates or harasses an individual in a public place who is not participating in the riot. And Mr. Speaker and members, safe communities are the foundation of everything we care about as Tennesseans. Every Tennessean needs to be able to live in safe communities across our state. This legislation applies equally to all Tennesseans, no matter which political banner you wave, Republican or Democrat, President Trump supporter, President Biden supporter. If you peacefully protest, this legislation does not apply. It's not peaceful to hold someone against their will, and there is no constitutional right that gives someone the ability to hold others against their will. Individuals have the right to remove themselves from a situation they did not want to be part of nor asked to be in the middle of. This legislation affirms Tennessee is not going down the road some of these other places in our country have gone, like Seattle and other cities. If you can violate and ignore the law and get away with it, then you're going to have more people do it. If you do it and you know severe penalties are going to come down on you, then I think people will think twice before engaging in illegal behavior. Law and order must be maintained along with the rule of law. President Reagan said it best. We must reject the idea that every time a law is broken, society is guilty rather than the lawbreaker. It is important to recognize that each individual is accountable for his or her actions. And with Mr. Speaker, with that, I'm going to yield to Representative Jason Zachary for some opening remarks as well.
Representative Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would just like to quickly speak to Section 2. Section 2 of this piece of legislation is what has drawn the most interest and the most questions as this legislation has been reviewed. If you draw your attention to Section 2.A, Section 2, it references the violation in subsection A as part of this legislation. So we're talking about Code 39-17-307. Currently, as law today, 39-17-307 of the Tennessee law says a person commits an offense who without legal privilege intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly obstructs a highway, street, sidewalk, railway, waterway, elevator, aisle, or hallway to which the public or a substantial portion of the public has access. So currently, what we're talking about, currently it is against the law to obstruct a highway, street, sidewalk, railway, waterway, elevator, aisle, hallway that the public has access to. That is against the law today. So what this legislation does, because of the environment we are in, enhances the penalty if you were breaking the law. And it also protects those who in many cases are being harassed, intimidated, kept from leaving their home and leaving their driveway or leaving their neighborhood. And some of you may say, well, give us a specific example, which I'll be glad to do. This past weekend, 2 weekends ago in Knox County, West Knox County, a neighborhood that I used to live in, experienced a group that entered the neighborhood of roughly 40 people entered the neighborhood. They blocked the neighborhood. They then moved into a cul-de-sac and blocked the driveways of the cul-de-sac, not moving, allowing people to either come in or leave the neighborhood or leave their homes. The Constitution does not give you the right to harass, intimidate anyone or hold anyone against their will. Sometimes here we throw around the words of the Constitution without actually referencing what the Constitution itself says. So let me, for the sake of this conversation, let me read Amendment 1 of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for the redress of grievances. Members, if you also go to Webster's 1828 dictionary, Daniel Webster put that dictionary together in 1828 to ensure the integrity of every word that our founders used in the Constitution. Fortunately, all these words are defined in Webster's 1828 dictionary. The word peaceably says without war, tumult, commotion, without private feuds or quarrels, without disturbance, quietly, without agitation, without interruption. It also defines protest, which says fiercely they opposed. It also defines riot, which is tumult, uproar, riotousness, assembly of 12 or more persons. So we have this misnomer that the Constitution gives us the right to peacefully protest. It does not. It gives us the right to peacefully assemble to redress a grievance. The law is clear. You cannot, as of the law states today in TCA 39, you cannot block railways, roads, waterways. You cannot impede people from progressing. You don't have that right today. All this legislation is doing is saying that if you do that and you are arrested, there's an additional penalty. Then it also says that those who feel threatened, who need to remove themselves from the situation, must exercise due care. That's a legal term that I'm sure many of you already know. Exercising due care. Due care refers to the effort made by an ordinarily prudent or reasonable party to avoid harm to another, taking the circumstances into account. It refers to a level of judgment, care, prudence, and determination and activity of that person that they would be expected to do under circumstances. The precise definition is made on a case-by-case basis, judged upon the law and the circumstances. So this legislation is simply saying if you were caught in that position, someone is breaking the law and holding you against your will in an intersection, roadway, railway, waterway, whatever that may be, if you exercise due care and unintentionally injure that person, you cannot be held criminally liable. I don't know how anyone can argue the case that someone can hold you against your will, you remove yourself from the situation, and then you should be held liable. So, Mr. Speaker, Leader, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this again. I experienced this 2 weekends ago in West Knox County, and so we need this legislation. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll renew my motion. It's not my bill, but I'll renew it.
Representative Zachary renews his motion. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
I second that, and we'll be glad to attempt to try to answer some questions.
All right. Any discussion on the bill? We'll start here. Representative Lamar, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This particular piece of legislation, as you all stated, grants immunity if someone unintentionally runs someone over. Can someone lie and say it was unintentional?
Leader Gant.
Representative, if there's a situation that occurs, the proper procedure that would take place is there would be an investigation in that situation by law enforcement.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. So regardless if could someone lie and the investigation cannot prove that they're lying, but they are, and they run someone over? Is it the potential to open the door to run somebody over?
Leader Gant.
That would be the situation. That situation can occur at any kind of event. I mean, that's an hypothetical situation that I cannot answer.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. So yes, someone can potentially lie and run someone over. How do you feel about your bill potentially leading to the death of a protester if they are ran over and died and they are immune? How does that make you feel?
Leader Gant.
Let me be very clear. If there is someone that targets somebody that is illegally in a roadway and they specifically target that person for various reasons, no matter what it is, and they kill that person, they are going to jail for a very long time.
Representative Lamar.
If they aren't targeting them and they run them over and kill them, which is a possibility, that's all I'm saying, how does that make you feel?
Representative Lamar, this is not about feelings. This is about the bill. So if you want to ask about the bill, that would be a wonderful thing. Representative Lamar.
In this bill, it gives immunity to someone who will kill a protester, regardless if it's intentional or unintentional.
Hang on, out of order. We'll let Leader Gant respond. Leader Gant.
Again, the legislation is very clear. Due care must be adhered to. If somebody specifically targets somebody in the road that they're there illegally to begin with, and they specifically target them and try to kill them, they're going to jail for a very long time. And if we need to bring and strengthen the enhancement of that, we can do that next year.
Representative Lamar.
Being that protesting is a First Amendment right and it's been around for years, why is it that we're bringing this bill today?
Leader Gant.
The increase in the penalty for obstructing a roadway sends a very strong message that if you're going to peacefully protest, this does not apply to you. But if you are going to illegally be in the road and take your protest into the road and violate the law, there's going to be some severe penalties for that.
Representative Lamar.
So just for clarification purposes, you're saying they were upping the penalty. So my question, why do we need to up the penalty if we already have these things in place?
Leader Gant.
I think a felony sends a very much stronger signal than a misdemeanor.
Representative Lamar.
And Mr.
Oh,
Speaker,
Leader
if
Gant.
I can finish. Imagine if you or one of your loved ones, they're going to the grocery store, going to the gym to work out, taking their kids to school, and they turn that corner, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation that they did not ask to be in. Think about that. What happens in that situation?
Representative Lamar.
I've personally been caught in a situation where I've seen a protest and I had to wait on a protest that I didn't agree with. It was actually a Trump protest. And at the end of the day, I had to sit there and wait until they got done doing whatever they wanted to do, saying whatever they wanted to say, and crossing that particular street. It was a street. It didn't make me feel, maybe I don't agree with them and what they were protesting about, but I didn't feel it was necessary that we get further penalizing them for protesting, speaking out about what they wanted to speak out about. So I'm just simply saying, regardless of what the particular issue is that somebody's protesting, I don't think we need to be sending a clearer message when we already have things in place where the police can use to move people out the streets. And matter of fact, since we're on that, let's talk about Memphis, Tennessee. When there were individuals who were protesting, they were protesting and there was the whole bridge situation. That's a clear example how the director at that time used de-escalation tactics to clear them out the way peacefully. No one got hurt. No one was upset. And we end up having a strong conversation together about how the issues that they were protesting can be fixed. Our law already works. And in Memphis, we use that law to clear their protests from that particular highway. So I'm saying this bill is unnecessary because the law works and I've seen it work. And so we don't need to be sending a more clear message to anybody, regardless about what they're protesting about. And I just believe this particular piece of legislation is dangerous because it can lead to someone truly getting hurt. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to yield to my colleague here as well to make some remarks as well.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, as I've looked at this particular legislation, look across our state, across our country, we live in one of the best countries in the world. We live in the best state in our union. One of those reasons is we have what's called a constitution. We have a U.S. Constitution, we have a Tennessee Constitution. And what that Constitution does is that it doesn't restrict our folks that we represent from doing anything. It restricts our government from doing things to our constituents. It is a document that says we cannot tell you what you can do under your First Amendment rights. We cannot do certain things that limits your ability to come down here and talk to us and let us know what your grievances are. It limits the government's power and puts that power back to our people. So what does this legislation does that's so important when we talk about what is a protest? What is assembling under our Constitution? What does the First Amendment guarantee for folks to come here, ask us for the redress against their grievances, ask to peacefully assemble to respond to what we do here? That's what this Constitution guarantees. And what's happening, ladies and gentlemen, members, and all those that can hear my voices, is that it's not turned into something that becomes peaceful. It becomes something that is violent. Something like someone can have more than 3 folks that's defined under this legislation as a riot, throwing fireworks at someone's house, preventing them from leaving, to going to work, from doing their jobs, to leaving a certain institution, climbing on top of their vehicles, hoping and invoking a violent response from someone else. That becomes a riot. That becomes actions that you do not have protection under our U.S. Constitution or our Tennessee Constitution. It becomes, the protester becomes violent. And we have a duty to protect those that do not operate under what our Constitution's protections provide for them. It is incumbent upon us to protect our citizens in this state and in this country. So we have to have a set of rules that our government follows. And what is that? It's the Bill of Rights. What is that we quote time and time again as we're on this floor to make sure we guarantee our citizens the right to redress its government in a way that is peaceful? What happens when it becomes unpeaceful? What happens when you cannot travel through this state freely? We dismantle the purpose that we are here, the purpose why we protect our citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this legislation is going to do. It's going to protect the very people that we are here, that we represent. So with that, take that into consideration when a protest is no longer protected under the First Amendment, because it's no longer peaceful. So this has exploded to something that we want to prevent those to come here and redress our government. I cannot disagree with that statement more. We have an open room. We have an open government. You can come here anytime you want, talk with us, describe what you have, your issues, your grievances here. And why is that? Because the Constitution guarantees it. So with that, Leader Gant, appreciate this legislation. I support this legislation. Know that this is defined by our rights that we hold so dear. So thank you very much.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, are we going to treat everyone under the law the same, regardless of their skin tone, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their creed or whatever? Are we going to carve out certain exceptions for one particular group because they're advocating for a cause that people think are just or not? Are we going to hold everybody accountable to the same thing? Are we going to treat everybody fairly or not? We've all seen things that have happened over the last couple of years that I think we all find appalling, how people are treated differently under our system of justice, depending on what political persuasion you're from. Some people are attacked and vilified and kept off of social media because they have a different political point of view. Members, that's wrong. Tennesseans know that's wrong, and Americans know that that's wrong. This is a good bill. This is a stay out of the darn road bill. Stay on the curb, wave your signs, yell, scream, do whatever you want to. But don't stick your body in front of somebody that doesn't have an interest in your cause and is simply trying to get to work, take their kids to school, go to the doctor, do a job. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor, for bringing this legislation. This is important. And I hope we all remember everybody needs to be treated unfairly and the same under the law. If we don't do that, we've lost America, folks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to recognize Chairman Todd, please, if you would.
Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, many of you know that last year I had an encounter with another colleague that was in my vehicle, and we were surrounded by folks that were not peacefully protesting. They were not peacefully assembled as our Constitution protects. They violently beat on my truck, blocked my egress, and I didn't know at the time until I consulted some folks later, but they were falsely imprisoning me. And I could only imagine, it was, an incident and nothing that stands out as certainly a major factor in my life. But I'm just thinking about, what if it was my wife? What if it was my daughter? What if it was one of your family members that was in that situation? They'd have been scared to death. I mean, they were beating, at one point, hit my glass so hard that I thought it was going to break. And that would have escalated into something that would not have been pretty. And this prevents that from happening. What this boils down to is really simple. Just hear me on this one point. When a person's rights, at least what they think are their rights, go to the point and they cross the line to where they're violating another person's rights. That's what we're talking about here. That's all we're talking about. When that peaceful assembly turns into something that is not peaceful and that is violating another person's rights. That's all we're talking about here. It's going to have an increased penalty, and it's going to give that person who's being violated the opportunity to get out of that situation by operating under due care and proceeding out of that situation so that it will de-escalate and not turn into something violent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to our bill presenters, I just want to raise this point. I have listened to much of what has been said, and I hope that we would have the same caution when it comes to someone who may not engage in operating their vehicle in a considerate manner. Just as reference has been made to, sometimes you will have peaceful protesters, and you may have a situation where someone does go a bit too far. The exact same thing could happen for those who do not regard the safety of those who are peacefully protesting, and they may take license because of this legislation and intentionally do harm to somebody. And I know when we're talking about legislation and we're talking about policy making, we all do our very best to make policy proposals that will improve our communities. We have a former member of our General Assembly who, when she was a council person, saw an injustice in our community. And they were dumping garbage in Bordeaux. Economic situations were not going in the right direction. Environmental injustice was occurring because the city's landfill and waste was in the African American neighborhood. And so the African Americans in that community banded together. And they said, we've got to peacefully assemble and redress our government to close the Bordeaux dump. but the government did not listen, no matter how much the members talked about the need for it. And so then Council Member Harper stood out there with others in a sign to try to block a truck coming in to keep dumping on Bordeaux. And she was arrested. Thankfully, she was not hit. Thankfully, she was not harmed or maimed or even killed. And so I just want us to be mindful of the fact that when we do create policy, as much as we try to create policy that prevents an extreme on one end, we need to be mindful that somebody else can take this legislation, and that's my concern, that someone else may read into this, that they have the license to be able to plow through a crowd or be able to injure somebody with their vehicle, even though no one up there may be thinking that, and no one up there would intentionally do that. There are people who will listen and read and interpret what we pass, and that's my concern about this legislation. That's my concern about what we're going to, what we're voting on today, is the effect it's going to have on those who may not have the patience to allow a protest to occur, particularly when we talk about the fact that people are hurting and people have tried to peacefully redress their government, and still instances may occur when someone plows through that. So I do want you to take note of that and be mindful of that, because I don't want this to be a situation where, again, someone takes this legislation and takes it as license to plow through somebody and do harm to somebody else.
Leader Gant.
Dr. Love, thank you very much for your well thought out comments there. That well taken from here. I know everybody up here that's taken very well. So thank you for those comments.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, if we find that this thing is working to the detriment of what we consider our citizens, will we be able to expedite a way of changing it in good order? After we looked at data, things don't go the way we thought they would go, and there are some tragedies. There's something that happens to some of our citizens. Will we be able to change it quickly?
Leader again.
Representative, I think that's the purpose why we meet here every year.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would hope that that would not occur. But I know human nature. I know how we are, especially when we get angry at each other. There's an old saying that says, "To whom the gods will destroy, they must first make angry." When we get angry, we do a lot of things that we regret a little later on. We all have them at some point. Some just more intense than others. And the anger in our public discourse, however we don't like to see it, but in the course of the country has been utilized, I think, and brought about sometimes even decent change. What I wonder, and I'm a little bit concerned about, is the fact that if we figure out that our people cannot express themselves, and I know that's not what we're attempting to do, they cannot express themselves, that it goes underground. And when it goes underground, it bubbles up. And when it bubbles up, it blows up. That's what we have to be careful with at all times, And many of y'all may have brothers and sisters, you may have large families, and we do things in our families that many times you would think ought not happen, but it occurs even in our own blood family, which we all are family according to the word, but it happens. We blow up and we fight with each other, and sometimes it goes too far, but it's even worse, I think, when the family harbors something and it's never said, and people whisper about it and so forth. I think what's good is that we always need to know what's going on, let people express it, And I think what's happening with Tennessee, people are thinking, because when you travel, you hear things, that we're trying to prevent our citizens from having this say, if it doesn't align with what I want to be said. So I'm just going to issue that cautionary tale that we look at it, and if it's not working, that we adjust as quickly as we possibly can so the people can always have their say. Whether it agrees with me or not, you got to have your say. That's the thing on this House floor. And I really thank the Speaker for allowing people to have their say on the floor. It's a good thing. Even when I don't agree with it, it's a good thing. Thank you.
Leader Gamble.
Thank you, Representative Towns. Your comments are very well taken as well. Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'm going to yield to Chairman Faison, if you would recognize him.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thinking of this bill, I'm going to share with y'all 3 things that happened in America in the last year. I'll start with July 6th. In California, some protesters, rioters, upset, championing a cause. And it just so happened in the neighborhood that they were in, a young pregnant mama went into labor. Had to have an ambulance pick her up. On their way to the hospital with a young, scared, pregnant mama, protesters surrounded that ambulance on July 6th. The workers on the ambulance rolled down their window and started pleading and begging with them, telling them that they're in an emergency situation. We have a mom who we've got to get to the hospital. She's in labor. The leader of the rally started screaming, "She doesn't even matter. She's ignorant." Talking about that mom, and they kept pressing in. Later last year in Florida, protesters decided to get around a hospital where ambulances were dispatched from. And as fate would have it, there was an emergency where someone's life was in danger. They refused to allow the ambulances to leave. The protesters, the rioters stood around and refused for them to leave. That city had to call ambulances from further away to come and take care of the people in a health emergency. This very year, January 6th, insurrectionists, thugs, whatever you want to call them, I stand with you in that, attacked our Capitol. Some of the stories you don't hear is that they kept emergency personnel from coming to our Capitol. Shame on them. Shame on all these people who would do such a thing. Let me tell y'all something. It is good and wholesome and just, and all 99 of us deserve for people to redress their grievances straight at us. We deserve it. It's wholesome. It's right. It's the way our country was found, to stand up and tell government, you are doing wrong. And I would give my very last breath and fight till I'm dead for people to come in and protest and say, we do not like what you're doing. I will willing to die for the First Amendment of the United States of America. This bill is not about the First Amendment of the United States of America when it comes to redressing their disagreements with me or you. This bill honors the life of that young mama and that little baby that she was about to have, and the people in Florida that they couldn't get an ambulance to, and the people and the police and the Capitol Police over there. A minute ago, we talked about my friend, Senator Thelma Harper. Some of y'all might not know this, but her and I were very close. We've actually traveled together. We have dined together many times. She was on GovOps with me for 4 years. We spent lots of time together. As a matter of fact, if you looked at my Facebook, you would see I did a short oral history with Senator Harper, and we developed a very tight bond early on when I got here 11 years ago, and we became friends, buddies, where we would actually go out to eat together after GovOps. I knew her very well, and she was colorful in her speech. If you did not know her, she would drop a cuss word. She was colorful, guys, and she was passionate. And one of the things that I respected and loved so dearly about Senator Harper is her ability to say, these people are wrong. And it didn't matter if it was her party or not, or your people were wrong. She was just who she was, and she was not controlled by any group. And I will tell you, I knew her well enough to listen to her stories. If she had watched what went on in California, Florida, or DC, she wouldn't say they need to be protected. She would say they need to be taken out to the woodshed. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, if it's your family, if it's your wife, it's your daughter, somebody that their life is in danger, and some people that can't get their grievance heard enough, they're going to stand around them and keep them from staying alive, keep them from help. You yourself would be willing to do whatever it takes to protect your family. This bill is a just bill because it protects you and your people from someone who would say, you don't matter. She's ignorant. Look it up if you don't believe me. That's what happened. We are making sure in Tennessee that type of mentality, leave her alone, who cares? She's ignorant. Doesn't matter if she's pregnant. We don't do that in Tennessee because we believe all life is precious. And if you care more about your own life than to get in front of a car and stop people, that's on you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure a lot of us in this room probably get this question a lot. And the question is, what made you interested in running for office and what made you interested in politics? And I'm not going to go in a long-winded answer on my response to that, but there was a moment that I witnessed on TV when I was just 11 years old that I'll never forget. And it happened on June 5th, 1989. And it was one person who stood in Tiananmen Square after ongoing 1989, the democracy movement in China that went on from April 15th to June 4th, and all the protesters had been dispersed from Tiananmen Square. This one person stood up to a tank. I know everyone in this room has seen that moment. It's an iconic moment. And I said to myself, I hope to one day be a representative in my state, in my country, and show the courage that one person showed in that moment where they gave their life to stand up to this, to stand up for what they believed in and try to encourage and promote democracy in their country. And I think that protest is a critical element to this country. And we must protect it. And I realize there are situations where people might block roads, they might block streets, and it might create problems for some folks. But we must always remember the importance of protest in this country. And so what gives me the most concern on this piece of legislation is that it just seems like it leaves a lot of open-endedness to somebody who might drive over protesters. And I do have a specific question I wanted to ask is, I mean, there are permits that are issued for legal protests in this state. So if somebody comes upon a legal protest and someone might even have a permit to be there, how was that person to know whether or not that protest is legal and permitted or not?
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That would be up to, for example, here in the city of Nashville. If they issued that permit, it would be up to that municipality to make sure those participants that are going to be in the road with a permit be there safely.
Leader Gant. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if those protesters were, I guess, run over or struck by a vehicle, who would be then liable and responsible for that? Would it be the city or would it be the protesters?
Leader Gant.
The municipality obviously would set forth rules for that permit, and then if something occurs like you're describing, a full investigation by law enforcement would follow.
Representative Powell.
So it's possible then that if someone thought that they needed to get through somewhere, the example was used, maybe my wife is in labor and I need to get to the hospital, and there was a legal protest blocking the street, and I ran over, tried to take my vehicle through those cars, and those people were run over. You're saying then that would be up to law enforcement to determine who was at fault for that, and the city perhaps could be liable for that?
Leader Gant.
In that situation, they would be within the law, and this would not apply.
Representative Powell.
Thank you for that. So just to clarify, you said they would be within the law. Who would be within the law?
Leader Gant.
The people you are referring to.
Representative Powell.
But in the situation I just outlined, it's somebody that actually ran over somebody because they were coming upon a legal protest, and they thought it escalated in their minds the need to drive through the protest because, say, again, maybe their wife was in labor and they were trying to get to the hospital. So under this, you're saying that would be legal and that would be justified?
Leader Gant.
I'm sorry. If you can summarize your question one more time, I'm sorry.
Representative Powell.
So if there is a permitted protest and a vehicle and a person comes upon it, and for whatever reason they think necessary, they feel like they need to get through the protest, and they drive their vehicle through the protest, someone is injured, someone is killed, are they held liable? Is the city also held liable? Or is it up for law enforcement to determine that? What's the recourse for that?
Leader Gant.
Again, I'll repeat that would be up to the local law enforcement to do their investigation to determine what happened, who's liable, and then that is obviously at some point possibly turned over to the district attorney.
Representative Powell.
Well, thank you. That gives me some concern on that answer, but I guess I just think that we've had a long history in our state of protest, obviously successful protest, defined the civil rights movement, peaceful protest, helped change the course of our country. And I just continue to find problems with this piece of legislation. I think it leaves a lot of ambiguity and vagueness and open to interpretation, and can allow folks to do harm and then claim something that they want to get out of responsibility. And so with that, I just have serious concerns with that, and I hope my colleagues will join me in voting against this piece of legislation and continue to protect the right of protest and peaceful protest in the state of Tennessee. Thank you.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to reiterate that this section that we just had this exchange about this legislation does not pertain to civil liability. This is only criminal liability, and I assume that's what you were referring to in our dialogue. So, but Representative Zachary has asked to make some comments.
Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Related to the last question, members, it's important to remember what is in law today. TCA 39-17-307 says a person commits an offense who, without legal privilege, knowingly or recklessly obstructs a highway, street, sidewalk, railway, waterway, elevator, aisle, or hallway. Let me say that again. A person commits offense who, without legal privilege. If you have a peaceful protest and you get a permit, you have then been giving the legal privilege. If someone then runs into that group or injures someone driving recklessly, they will then be held liable for that. The legislation said a person operating a motor vehicle who is exercising due care unintentionally causes injury or death to a person who is violating subsection A. Subsection A is 39-17-307. This is already illegal. You cannot knowingly or intentionally block a hallway, waterway, aisle, or roadway. If you have legal permission to be there, if you get a permit, which was a great question at UT, we had a big march at UT with over 1,000 students. The police were there. They got a permit, perfectly legal. If you do it without a permit, it is illegal because you did not gain legal permission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsors, did law enforcement ask for new tools to crack down on protests or grant immunity for drivers to run over protesters?
Lear Gant.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. Can you rephrase that in a different way? I didn't understand.
Representative Chisholm.
I'm trying to find the origin of the bill. Did law enforcement ask for more tools to, because you and I, we spoke, or did they ask for something to allow drivers to run over protesters?
Lear Gant.
No.
Representative Chisholm.
Every year, there's a bill that comes across the floor that not only gives me a heartburn, but also gives me a heartache. We've passed many bills on this floor that has given felonies for nonviolent offenses. However, with this bill, it seems to give a pass. We're sanctioning murder in a lot of cases. And I understand that may not be the intent of the bill, because the sponsor of the bill, you and I have spoken, and you told me the purpose of the bill is to prevent a protest from becoming a riot. However, out of the 3 years that I've been here, there's a term that I hear often, and that term is unintended consequences. And I'm afraid the unintended consequences of this bill would outweigh the spirit of the bill.
Lear Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you peacefully protest, this doesn't apply to you. If you follow the law, this doesn't apply to you, plain and simple.
Representative Chisholm.
So there was I call it a protest. There was a protest here in Nashville where citizens had AR-15s, and they came. I could be wrong. I think it was about they wanted barbershops to open back up or something like that. And when they came here to protest, we protected their First and Second Amendment rights. Meanwhile, again, I'm afraid of the unintended consequences here. I'm afraid that, well, we know bills, they boil down to the enforcement of the bills. And I'm afraid that maybe there's a protest in Memphis, and someone drives through a crowd, drives through that crowd. This bill makes the assumption that implicit bias does not exist, that law enforcement will always make the right decision, that all people of Tennessee would follow this bill to the exact notation of the bill. But we all know that some people would interpret this bill different, and some would see this as a license to run through a crowd and say, hey, I was afraid. I didn't feel comfortable. So I really think we have an opportunity to sit down and talk about this some more. We have an opportunity to sit down at the table of reason to come up with something that's palatable to all Tennesseans. Because we don't want to make a precedent of passing bills just because we can. We don't want to make a precedent of ensuring one group's safety at the expense of another group's safety. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Representative Chisholm. Well spoken. Thank you for your comments very much.
Representative Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? There's objection. We're on the board for previous question. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change the vote? Rudder, aye. Hazelwood, aye. Gant, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 66, 25 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting on House Bill 513 as amended. All those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 23 nays.
House Bill 513 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar number 1 dated for today.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, the Senate has returned House Bill 1130. The message reads, Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House House Bill 1130, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I'd like to non-concur.
Without objection, we non-concur. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, there's no further messages on the desk at this time.
Consent. Leader Lamberth, we have a consent counter. Can you make the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to take up the consent calendar.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, that's consent calendar number 2 dated for today.
Consent calendar 2. Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with Representative Towns, I move passage of the consent calendar 2 on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of consent calendar 2. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, any objections have been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on consent calendar 2? Seeing none, we're voting on consent calendar 2. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote. Camper, aye.
Ayes 88, no nays, one present, unvoted.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Lear Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, at this time, I would make a motion to recess till 4:30 today.
Without objection, recess till 4:30.